And I'm delighted to welcome Matt Golding onto the stage. So some of you may know Matt. He's from Rubber Republic, and he's been working with Antidote Studios on a sort of very particular type of storytelling, which is like short form videos, some funny. So again, just breaking those conventions, and I'll let Matt share more about what he's doing. So thank you, Matt.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Right. So I'm going to talk about. I'm basically going to build on a lot of what has come before. So there was amazing things said first, and one of them was we're sad because we know there's another alternative, and so that's part of what I'm going to talk about. I'm also going to build on what John said about how do we do this? How do we get these stories out there more? But we're going to do all of it with the help of Tina. I'm a massive fan of Tina, as much in her spirit as her songs, but to dive into her lyrics and like just get a bit academic and study, because she was a very prophetic woman. So here is the lyrics from We Don't Need Another Hero, and you can see they were ahead of their time. Out of the ruins, out from the wreckage, can't make the same mistake this time. I'm sure all of us working in sustainable storytelling kind of feel like this. We're going over and over again the same ground. We are the children, the last generation, sometimes probably all worry that. We're the ones they left behind, like why is nobody listening to us? And I wonder when we're ever going to change. So it's important, the repetition. Living under fear till nothing else remains. You sometimes wonder that's what the plan of like mainstream status quo society is. We don't need another hero's journey. These are the original lyrics before she kind of updated them to synthesize them. All we want is a new, more collective, visionary, just, honest, global narrative that respects our inherent superpowers of creativity, collaboration, and compassion for each other and the natural world, and allows us to thrive in harmony with each other, the more than human world, and the cosmos. Again, these were the original lyrics. She had to synthesize them down to a life beyond the Thunderdome. But that's songwriting. But this is what she was trying to say, and this was in 1985. So you can see this is a problem that's been around for a while. We clearly need to work out, how do we actually do the storytelling that Tina is so clearly telling us here to do? And so my background, how did I become involved with Tina? My background is I'm a filmmaker, but I'm a filmmaker with a very specific background. I've always been really fascinated with how the stories we tell shape the culture we live in, and why do some stories get shared more than others? So what is it about a story that gets it passed on through culture? But that first one is really important. We are surrounded by stories. Everything we do is stories. So building on what John said, I think sometimes it's important to step back and just not stand into a chair, but think, it is crazy the situation we find ourselves in. 99.9% of the population of Earth don't benefit from the stories that we've internalized as a culture. And sometimes we talk about these things as if we couldn't change them. And I fundamentally don't believe that's true, for many of the reasons John's touched on. But to take you through my story of how I got into this, I ran for a long time, and still run Rubber Republic, which essentially was a viral content studio. So for 15 years, I spent my life making viral campaigns. So this was a bit like what John did, but a bit more renegade. There were no rules. It's like, if you can get 1 million views, great. And we did that for charities, for big organizations, and eventually started working for people like eBay, Disney. We built a life-size Hulkbuster in a shed and took it to a kid's birthday party and lit the candles with a flamethrower. And got Disney's health and safety to sign that off. We made a cocktail in free fall, a gin cocktail jumping out of a plane. We took issue with a man who said stupid things on the internet about periods. We did lots of crazy things, but the 3 things that I learned through doing that were, the first one is respect your audience. And I don't think that's always something we do in sustainable communication, but if you speak in ways that are appealing, useful, and respect your audience, they will share that message for you. But you have to get that right. The second one is impact does not equal scale. We were a tiny studio making things that millions of people watched up against massive organizations. And I think that's a really important lesson when it comes to change. It doesn't take loads of us to create big change, especially when everyone is kind of stuck in these stories of the status quo. And trust your instincts. When there are no rules, then make things up. But I guess for me, how that works here is like all of you will have instincts about what is happening in the world. And we're so trapped in our heads, the stories that we've been taught are true, the stories we've been taught we have to operate by, and actually our gut and our heart often have much more to offer in this space. So That was my background. But then, you know, I recognized that the world was on fire. And once we'd worked out how you tell stories that reach millions of people, you do feel like a weight of responsibility, which is like, hang on, what do we do with this power? When I started out, I was just a young person trying to earn a living doing something fun. 10 years in, I'm like, we can reach millions of people with messages. What do we do with that power? So in 2019, I rebooted the business to focus only on using what we'd learned to do sustainable communications and only work with organizations that were 100% committed to creating a just and sustainable future for everyone. And have done that since then and done lots of really great work with youth climate activists, used humour to talk about why it's important to move your pensions with Aisling Bea, and done lots of great campaigning work with Greenpeace, XR, Youth Climate Strikers, using humour, using entertainment to get these messages out there. And so that was all really good. And we were trying to work out, can you earn a living doing this? Is it sustainable? And in simple terms, it is. But we still hit up against blockers. And so in 2022, I came to this kind of position where I'm like, we're doing some good stuff, but what are we still missing? And it felt a bit like this picture. It felt like we were doing positive things, but we were still allowing the world to burn. It wasn't really taking the edge off. So, and I had a bit of a reckoning at that point. What was it we were not doing, even though we were so committed to trying to help? And this is where I got to. I realized at that point that so often we are telling people what not to do. Like all of the work I was being paid to do was making humorous what not to do, what to clamp down on, what to legislate against, how to protest better. None of it was talking about the visionary, positive world we were trying to get to. None of it was outlining what we were sad because the alternative could be. Like, what is that alternative and how do we get there? And it felt, a lot of what my background's been has been about the emotion behind storytelling. When you ask somebody to share a film, and you don't ask them, you just make it, and they hopefully do, it's because it's created some connection with them that they're happy to become part of their identity and share publicly with other people. And there's a huge amount of an emotional nuance in that relates to a lot of what John talked about with the drama triangle. It's a profoundly caring thing. You have to know that you're giving people more than you're taking from them. Because we know, like when we did things, whether they're for charities or brands, we knew that they knew that if they share the film, they are promoting whatever brand or charity that they're sharing the film for. So we have to be careful that we're giving them more than we're taking from them. Otherwise, the mechanism doesn't work. But in terms of sustainable communication, yeah, we're not always doing much to give them something positive that they can lean into. And our story structures don't help that. So I started trying to work out how we could counter this. And I realized there was it took me down into this like peeling an onion and getting down to the core of the problem. It's like the core of the problem is quite deep. Our culture is so built on a hero's narrative, a very kind of a set of stories that come out of the world and the language that John's talked about that are quite hard to shift. They're quite hard to let go of. But when you step back and look at that, it's quite crazy. So, you know, if you think about what we often do in sustainable communications from a marketing context, and then think about how that would be in a car advert, say, it's like we spend a lot of time telling you why your current car was shit, what the risks of having a shit car were. We wouldn't do a lot of time talking about the better car you could have, how much sexier and more like successful it would make you look to have it, and how you'd get it. Like, it's implicit when you see a car advert, you know you can go and buy that car. But often with sustainable communications, we don't talk about what the things you are that you can do at the end of it. So it's like we're telling half of the story, and often I'd argue the wrong half, because you can actually make a lot of good communications only doing that visionary stuff without ever talking about the problem, but you can't do it the other way around. Also, from a social perspective, we're often focused on individual heroes when, as John's outlined, often the biggest change comes from collective action, people coming together and working together. And, you know, I've worked in an industry, I'm essentially a film director, which is a massively crazily focused amount of like prestige and responsibility. I don't deserve all of the role of being a film director is an example of how we focus attention and accolade on too few people. No film is actually just made by the director, it's made by hundreds of people. But as a cultural thing, it focuses attention on the idea that we need people in positions of status, power, and wealth to make change, rather than all of us. All of us can make change, and in fact, if we work together in small groups, we can make massive change relatively quickly. And then the power context, if we're always asking permission, if so much of our active energy as a sustainable movement is spent asking permission to do things, and I've done loads of this. I've run campaigns. We got 350 businesses to queue up over Millennium Bridge to sign a book to ask politicians to take more action on climate and nature. And that stuff can really work, and I still am involved in some of that. But I'm also conscious that every time we do that, we're focusing power on those people that are making that decision. And it's often binary, like hundreds of people will come together to focus a decision on a person who often says no. And that doesn't feel like a very good use of our power, and it doesn't teach us that we have agency. It teaches us that we have to ask other people for permission. So what could we do differently? How could we go beyond this kind of place we're at, which is baked around the hero's journey? And just to give some quick examples, I mean, first of all, there are other models even within our culture. So the heroine's journey is a much more helpful story framework for where we're at. The hero's journey is often like, I'm here and I've got a need and a want and I must go out and destroy another civilization in order to learn how to overcome that. And I'll come back, having ransacked that place, back to my place, which is a like stable, we'll come back to the Shire and nothing has changed. And that's really great. Sorry about the destruction, but I've learned my personal lesson and that's a really good outcome. Whereas the heroine's journey is much more about shifting within a society or within a culture. Often it's based around a new idea that is challenging to that culture, and the process of the structure of the heroine's journey works through how to assimilate that into that culture. And that feels like a much more helpful structure for where we're at. The hero's journey is about an individual hero against an external foe, and it's very binary, good versus bad. Whereas the heroine's journey is about building allies. The foe is internal to your society, which feels more relevant to what we're doing here. And it avoids binaries. The whole process of the structure of that narrative arc is to find the healthy middle ground between the different positions. I'm going to skip that slide. One of the things that I've found most helpful to kind of connect the dots with the journey I've been on is this idea from Marshall Gantz. All stories are training. And we have had this view that if we tell people facts or if we tell people the bad outcome, like we make dystopian dramas on Netflix, people will see the problem and they'll react to do something about it. But I fundamentally don't think that's true. I think what actually it does is, I would bet, well, I'll ask the question, how many of you have thought about what you would do in an apocalyptic situation? And is that potentially connected to the fact that you could rock onto Netflix or Now TV right now and probably watch at least 5 different dramas that outline for you what that would look like, which triggers in you this question of, oh, I wonder what I'd do there. I wonder what I'd do if society collapsed and, bringing us back to Tina, Mad Max ensued. But we don't really have any stories that envision the world we want to create. So we're not training ourselves for those worlds. We have no practice, no emotional or mental practice for those visions of the future. So what do we do about that? Because I think fundamentally that is our role as storytellers right now. We have to learn, and it's not easy, but that's what I'll go on to talk about next. We have to learn how do we do that. And it's not easy because it transgresses not only societal norms, but also the norms within our storytelling culture. So, this is where I've got to. We don't want to tell people how to fix the world. We don't know. There's no one way to fix the world. It's a crazy thing to try and do. And nobody wants to be told what to do. I don't like being told what to do. I'm sure most people don't. So we don't want to do that. What we want to do is show people what others like them are already doing to create a better world and the benefits it's bringing them. And then if we're going to talk about why, let those people explain in their own words, because that's much more powerful than me or any of us talking about why they did it. Let them tell people why they did it. That's the ideal. It's not always super easy, but I think this is what we need to move to. We need a story that invites me in to step into my agency, to protect a common sense freedom. Let's not make it political. This is all obvious stuff. We all want clean air. We all want a world in which our kids can survive. With everyone else. We want to do it together. It's much more fun to do things together. We don't want to become preppers and be like, oh, I've got my guns. We want to work out how to create a world we all want to live in. And so the way I'd say that is collective creativity is our species' killer app. That is the thing that defines us. And it sounds crazy and it could sound a bit trite, but it's so obvious when you think about all the stuff we're told we are. We're thugs, we're violent, it's a dog-eat-dog world. If that was the case, we wouldn't have built this amazing world to protect in the first place. It's clear that if you had to put those things in a ranking, collective creativity would have won out. Otherwise, we wouldn't have Rome. We wouldn't have all these amazing cities and places to try and protect in the first place. So I think it's self-evident that creativity done together is what we're best at. And so that's what we need to lean on now. So what I've tried to do from that thinking is build an experiment in how would you do this storytelling. And it's a platform called Antidote. And the desire of the platform is to explore how we could use storytelling to help us rediscover our collective power. How can we relearn what it is to work together to create massive change? And I'm adamant that it's totally possible. We just need to learn to talk about it better. And for most people, as John said, for most people, lobbying governments or working through buying through corporations and changing your buying habits is not the most powerful lever they have for change. Partly for the reason I've said, the political avenue is binary. You're asking permission, won't they do what you want? And also, we're never going to shop our way out of this problem. What that means, though, is for most people, their actual most powerful route for agency is at home as citizens in their communities, or anybody sitting outside of those systems. So all of us can do this, but we're not really going to find it as easy to do it through our work head as we are through our home head. Because our home head is not bounded by all the bullshit of capitalist corporate life. It's not trying to make next quarter's profit margin go up and solve all these problems systemically. It's just trying to say, what do I want the world to be like? And what do my neighbours want the world to be like? And what could we do locally that's one thing to build that world we want to live in? And that's a much more exciting question. And it comes up with much more exciting answers. And so the energy we're trying to capture in the stories we're telling is this energy of don't ask, just do. There's a kind of punk ethos or a kind of slightly renegade spirit that's exciting to see in other people. And that's the energy I think we should be levering much more. We shouldn't be preaching to people about how you could and should make a better world. We should be showing them how people breaking out of the status quo are already doing that. And it's happening all around us. So there's this sense that big change starts small. It doesn't come from governments or corporations. And you can look back through history. The NHS was not started by McKinsey. It was started by miners in Wales, a small group of people who came up with an idea to make their local area better that was then transferred by Anais Bevan to the country. And that is often how change happens. We kind of create this false story at this moment in history that we need to look to corporations or governments to create new ideas for how society can work. But that's never where they've come from. In the understanding I have from history, people coming together create solutions for social issues. Corporations just work out to sell us more stuff around those. And often that causes as many problems as it does solutions, as you can see with the kind of child-free phone thing happening at the moment, which is great. But we look to Apple as innovators, but I would not say that's where we should be looking. We should be looking to each other. What do we want? So we're trying to work out how do we shift. Because it is a challenge. We're trying to shift from this prejudice people have, which is community stories are boring, like they're things that happen in your local village hall with woolly jumpers on. Community feels small. We're never going to change the world from our communities. It's all too big. And we're so individualized, we're resistant. So we are as much a part of the problem as anything else, in that we slot back into these stories that John's outlined. We slot back into the idea that, well, I'm not big enough to make a difference. And how do we get it to this, which I think is the truth on the right? Community power, network together, can change the world. But why isn't it working? So we started trying this about 4 years ago, and we took some stories from pandemic recovery projects, got a little bit of funding from the lottery, and we tried to tell them. And it bombed. So part of how I've got here is hard learning from trying and failing. But why did it bomb? Well, first of all, I was like, oh, that doesn't work, and I went and did some other things for a year. But after a year, I'm like, hang on, I'm still facing the same problems, which I've already outlined. I was still doing organizing creative protests, which weren't really working. And so I went back to it, and I was like, hang on, what was it people said about why they didn't believe the stories I told them? And there were some patterns. And so I tried to start unpicking those patterns. What is it that they are resistant to? What are the hurdles of convincing people that we have collective power in the stories we tell them? And there were patterns. And so what we've done is created three things. We've created a filter. How do we filter out the stories that if you're trying to take these stories to a mainstream audience, don't land very well? And I can quickly go through those in a minute, but we also created a framework. Even if you filter out those stories, you still need to tell people certain things to overcome 70 years of individualistic consumerist culture to convince them of their power reasonably quickly. And one of the things we found is, part of the reason we did this is when we started trying, we realized you could actually do this and it could backfire. If I said to you all, hey guys, you've got creative collective power to change the world, and then I told you a story and it played into all your assumptions that I outlined before, it kind of makes you all go, oh yeah, God, I didn't really believe you, but now I definitely don't. And so we realized that there's a care that has to be put if you're trying to break people out of this kind of myopia of the consumer story that is useful to put into finding the stories we tell and how we tell them. And then we also worked out what are the things we're challenging. What are the assumptions about our culture that we are kind of intentionally transgressing by showing these stories? And what is it that the positive examples we're giving are demonstrating to people that breaks them out and challenges the conventions underpinning? This is all quite small, but like, so for example, people power is small. People power is weak. Yes, we could do things in a small way, but it couldn't work in a bigger way. Change requires wealth, power, or influence. So we've picked stories that transgress all of those things. People who don't come from positions of power, don't have money, don't have skills, and they've done something amazing anyway, and it gives an example to all of us. So these are some of the stories we're telling, and in a minute I'm going to show you some of the films, and then you can tell me what you think. This is all an experiment, but the stories are, an example is Ambition Lawrence Weston, a community on the outskirts of Bristol, who came together, door-knocked every house on the estate, and ended up building a massive wind turbine. Civic Square in Birmingham, who are piloting a neighbourhood fit for the actual future we're going to get in collaboration with other citizens from Birmingham. Repowering London, who are working out how to collectively build renewable power on the roofs of buildings across London, trying to make that as accessible as possible. Or Carrot Greengrocers in Northern Ireland, who asked the question, what did people want in the bounce back from the pandemic? And they kind of came together and said, well, we kind of really liked having a greengrocer on the high street. So they used that as a way to crowdfund a greengrocer that only sold local regeneratively grown food, which gave people an access point into that world. You'll notice in all of these things, we are not mentioning climate, sustainability, nature. We're framing them around things that are just going to create a better, more just, fairer world for everyone. And that's intentional, because as soon as we start framing everything around climate, nature, we are focusing on things that only a subset of the population care about. And also, all of those actions are implicit in everything that everyone does in this way. We have not yet found a community who've come together to build a collectively owned fossil fuel-powered energy system. It just doesn't happen. It's just normal that people care about this, and we have all the stats to back that up. We know 89% of the people support bigger action on climate, so we kind of have to trust that when we find these stories of people already doing stuff, they're already going to be doing good stuff, and not try and micromanage that too much. Obviously, if we did find one of those stories, we might not tell it, but like, but ultimately, we're trusting that people are coming up with ideas to build the future they want. We've started putting these stories out. So we created a website. We've created 2 social media channels on Instagram and TikTok, and we're just testing out the framework that we've built. And I'm going to play I'm going to play 2 of the films now. I'm just checking time. I think I've gone pretty quick there. Sorry, we were short on time, so I went a little more rapidly. But I'm going to play 2 films.
Lawrence Weston is a bunch of what used to be unruly residents coming together to try and make their lives a lot better. They've now finally, after around about 50 years, got a voice that's being listened to, and that's all come about by their hard work and dedication over the last 12 years. The Antidote started in 2012. The residents had had enough of their lot, and they wanted to make some changes. So we door-knocked every house on the estate and asked 3 simple questions, really. One was, what is good about living in Lawrence Weston? What is not so good? And what needs changing? We put all that information into a development plan, and that is now the residents-led and driven development plan for the area that we're delivering. Biggest achievement, I think, is having a voice and people listening to us at long last. And the outcomes that we've got are immense. We've delivered a neighbourhood development plan that gives us a lot of power over how houses in the local area get built. We've got a local lettings policy which ensures that a lot of the local people living in the area benefit from these new houses that are coming online. We've brought a large supermarket to the area. That was a massive call from residents for many, many years. We were just about to open a brand new 2.5 million community centre. Shuttle bus service to get our residents to those places of employment that public transport didn't go. We've reinstalled ancient orchards. We've built the tallest wind turbine in England, owned by the local residents. So the wind turbine came about from our need to generate a sustainable income. One of our aims when we first started out was to ensure that any local assets brought a benefit to local people. That's what instigated the idea of renewable energy and the fact that it generates an income. We've got around about 9 other wind turbines in the local area where we don't really benefit from. So we thought, well, why should it be other people that are, pinching our wind, if you like, and using our land? Why can't we have a slice of that? Delivering for us the largest wind turbine, as I say, in England. That's been turning now for about a year, and we're about to see our first payment from the profits of that this January. pride of place from the residents' perspective is at its all-time high, which has got to be a good thing. Who would have thought that a small impoverished community like Lawrence Weston would have built the tallest wind turbine in England, built their own community centre, building their own 38 affordable homes. I mean, what we've achieved is massive. We've got a really low skill set, low knowledge set, we've got no money, but yet we've still managed to do it. So there's no reason that any other community similar to ours can't go on and achieve great things like the residents of Lawrence Weston have.
So that's Mark and his community. There are some things we're still working out. We still have to feature one person. We tried featuring two and trying to make it about community. It didn't work so well, so there's teething troubles with what we're trying to achieve. But I think the most important things there are, we've got to be careful not to overcomplicate what we're doing, or what we're trying to say. This is a group of ordinary people, and you could apply this, I believe, to any group of ordinary people. I could just chunk you up into groups of 10. We could solve this problem. It's not that we don't know how to do the fundamentals of what we're trying to achieve, or at least we don't what we're trying to aim for. Like, if people understand the issues they face, they can solve them. It's almost like the problem is we're asking people who are trapped in the system, going to COP or inside businesses to try and solve the problem. But ordinary people can already solve the problem. So I think we need to make sure we don't overcomplicate what we're trying to overcome. Also, positively, they can then inspire. Like, Mark and his team have worked with the local council and pulled them on this journey. And I could tell you loads of exciting stories that I haven't got time for right now. But like the way they operate, which is kind of constructively disrupting the status quo to pull people on this journey, it's much harder for people to turn around and ban you from making your area better. Whereas they can easily ban protest, and authoritarianism was already clamping down on that. So like, this is a much more robust way to create change that's harder to legislate against, because it creates a public backlash when you try and stop people from making things better. The challenge with, so that was a film where we've done a bunch of films where we've interviewed people behind the projects. The challenge with that, from my perspective as somebody trying to get these stories out there, is it's hard to kind of shape the story a bit. So we've tried other techniques. And so what I'm going to show you now is an approach we tried collaborating with Rachel Donald from the podcast Planet Critical, where we tried a kind of slightly tongue-in-cheek news style.
The series of the news has really lost the plot, hasn't it?
When is the series finale of the news?
Here's a plot twist from Northern Ireland that's actually good news. Sick of paying an arm and a leg for their weekly shop, the people of Carrickfergus decided the supermarkets just didn't deserve their hard-earned cash. Especially because those supermarkets underpay farmers to rinse our soil and deliver overpriced food filled with plastic. So they figured out how to stock their fridge with affordable food grown just down the road, and they want you to know how to do it too. You'll need 1. An agroecology farmer. He's got pesticide-free food and healthy soil, but he doesn't have any customers because Tesco won't respond to his emails. 2. Some frustrated folk. They've got fire in their bellies and time on their hands, which they want to get dirty. And 3. An HQ, the heart of the operation where produce and community meet. That's right, the revolution is a greengrocer, and it's got supermarket bosses sweating on their yachts. Carrickfergus greengrocers expected to make 625 quid in their first week. Instead, they ended up raking in over £10,000. Turns out, everyone was just ready to join in. I mean, it makes sense when you think about how poor soil quality is costing us over £1 billion every year in the UK. If we all had one of these, our food would be affordable, our soil would be healthy, and our climate wouldn't be collapsing. All over the country, people are taking matters into their own hands to write the plot lines that we want to see happen. They're creating a world without shit-filled rivers, without impossible energy bills, and without plastic in our apples. It's really not that much to ask. Get plotting. To get involved, click the link.
So that's a film where we've been able to more directly follow the framework we've built. That basically step by step goes through exactly the framework we've worked out that overcomes the inherent likelihood that people we're talking to won't want to believe this. Obviously, we've tried to make it entertaining. Our next step is to make it even more entertaining. But we're getting the hang of it now. And the point is, there are ways to do this. And it takes a little bit of thought. We've also tried just straight humor. I have got a film here, but I don't think I've got time to show it to you. But I can. Anybody who wants to see more of what we're doing? Okay, I'll talk really fast afterwards. Go on then.
What's happening in Hull?
What?
Says here people realise the system isn't working for them.
and started setting up their own local democracies. How did we miss this? Well, I suppose we got cocky after capturing the entire political, financial, and corporate structures and forgot to look after the little people who make all of our profits possible.
What would it take to shut it down? Think some Taylor Swift tickets would do it?
They're not the only ones. It looks like there's projects like this all over the UK.
Well, what does this mean?
It means they're making their own decisions without us.
Well, what happens if people start making their own decisions?
What does happen if people start making their own decisions?
So again, a lot of what we're trying to do is just invert this idea of power. Fundamentally, I believe we can change this together. So we need to seed that into our stories. Stop talking about as if it's an uphill battle, we've got a mountain to climb. Start talking as if the truth, which is true, is there's 99% of us who want this to change. If we get aligned, it's going to change. It's going to be very hard to stop us. And I think we need to find the confidence to talk in that way and tell stories in that way. We tried these stories through academic testing. We've been working with the University of Bristol to test them. 87% of people who saw these stories felt they could make a significant difference to tackle social issues. The numbers go down when you talk about whether they actually do something, but they're still high. Still over 60% of people felt they could and might get involved in projects like this. But partly that's where we're at the moment. One of the things we've realized is we're trying to tell stories that the framework underneath this, and I can share this with anyone who wants to afterwards, but we're trying to focus on stories that focus on people's essential monthly needs, their food, their housing, their energy, their transport, their decision-making, because those are unifiers. All of us need those things. And increasingly, people are, the cost of living crisis and affects almost everyone, really. Like, rising inequality means that somewhere in society, apparently, there's a group of people who are not touched by it. But, I'm not aware of where they are and don't see many of them. Most of us are scared to pay our energy bill at the end of the month or week. And that's the we need to show how our collective power can take power over those essential things back. Not that we can do our recycling a bit better, but still be petrified for the future of humanity, but we can actually take ownership, collective ownership of some of those key fundamental things. And so we need to learn how to show people how they're done. By doing what I've just said, we're creating stories that are inspiring but could sound too big. So the next step of what we're doing is going back. We're about to make a podcast where we go and interview all of the people we featured about how they did it, because none of the steps involved in anything they did were things beyond any of us. They're all totally achievable. And when you hear how they did it, it's literally, we went and door knocked everyone on the estate. Then we organised a meal in the local village hall. We asked people what they wanted to do, and then we started working out how to do it. And it's not much more complicated than that. They ended up with a massive wind turbine or a greengrocer that only stocks local food. But none of the steps, and there were bumbling failings along the way. But that makes this stuff much more relatable. Again, Marshall Gantz, who I think is brilliant on all of this. Marshall Gantz is a movement builder who's worked on things all the way from the Black Power movement through to getting, oh my God, my brain's gone. The president, anyway, into power. Oh, I'm dyslexic. Sometimes things just go out of my mind. But he says this: hope resides not somewhere in a distant future, but in the sense of possibility and a pathway to action. And I think that's what we need to be showing. Here's a future we could live in. Here are some people building it, and here's how they did it. That is a really powerful toolkit for changing the world. So that's what we're trying to do here. The 3 pillars of what we're trying to do next are to inspire people with stories like I've shown you, to unpack how they were done, to give people a toolkit for how you could do it too, and give you the confidence, build your agency, and the idea that you have the ability, if you work together with other people, and it doesn't have to be your local community, it could be a community internationally, but the point is, if you get 5 to 10 people who have different skills and put them together on a problem you can all see, you can probably smash it. There aren't that many people trying. It's actually relatively straightforward to make a dent. It's hard to have long-term success, but once you've started, you keep overcoming the hurdles and you'll get there. And then we're trying to help people get started. So we've built an AI tool that we're just refining at the moment, where you can put your postcode in and it will show you collective creative action that could create systemic change on your essential monthly needs near your house, so that you can find what's already going on. Because one of the most powerful things is this is already happening all around us. There are thousands of projects in the UK and around the world that are already doing this. You don't have to start it, you can just join in. And so if we can help you find it, one of the most powerful things we find when we tell these stories is that people think nothing's going on, and then we tell them that there's 3 things that we know about down the road from their house. And they're like, oh my God, I didn't know. So how do we help overcome that visibility problem? A, that the stories have, and B, that the stories near you have. So that's what we're trying to do. We've also found that once you frame these stories in this way, it's massively powerful. Like, people have started coming to us, attracted by what we're doing. We're talking to BBC Radio. We've worked with Climate Spring to develop some TV concepts that we're putting out, and we're talking to TV companies about. We're talking to the National Trust about how to use this framework in what they're doing. We're working with Immediate Media to make a podcast unpacking how they were done. The point is, people want to hear these stories. It's a way of framing things that is much more attractive to audiences than the idea that we want to educate them about some facts about climate and then give them some kind of funneled things they can do, as John said, like sign this petition. That doesn't give anyone a sense of agency that they can choose or have a freedom to kind of co-create the future they want to live in. And I'm near, how long have I got? A couple more minutes. This, for me, this is my guiding light, and it sounds really stupid, but this emoji, which is like welling up with joy, because this is the feeling I get when I see these stories. Like, it makes me want to cry at the beauty and brilliance of people that I'd kind of forgotten existed after like most of a lifetime of being told everyone's shit. And like that's always my focus. I want to make myself cry at some point in the story and hope that it has the same effect on you. I'm not trying to cry with joy. And so this is, I think, the challenge for us as storytellers. The challenge is we need to learn to tell stories of hope to each other that show our agency can be built, networked, and spread. So that's a really important thing. Part of the framework we've developed is we always mention everyone else. So if we ever tell a story, we tell the story that this is part of a movement of other stories. So we're always trying to reference the networking of all these individual stories so that we emphasize the idea that it's not just one group of people acting collectively. They are part of a movement of other communities acting collectively. Because when you see the scale of it, you're like, how could that not fail? And we need to strengthen our belief in the power to change things by seeing we already are. People like us already are. And how that can grow and how it has in the past. Like, this is how change has always happened. Change doesn't happen by governments leading us or corporations coming up with some innovative solution. That's not how change happens. We need to remind ourselves this is how change happens, and it will again, because that's what will give us the belief that we can do this. I've got a thing about courage and fear. Ours is a story of courage, not fear, but I'm going to gloss over that. You can talk to me about it later, because I need to end on Tina, obviously. And again, like Tina's lyrics being ahead of their time, looking for something we can rely on. Each other, like we can rely on each other. There's got to be something better out there. It is, we're already building it. Love and compassion. I mean, obviously that's the root of all of this stuff. Their day is coming. Again, it's on the way. All else, the castle's built in the air. And you can see she's referencing here collective action. She's referencing tangible demonstrations. This is about demonstration, not protest. How do we demonstrate the future we want? By building it together, not rail against the future we're being given by protesting against it and waving our fist. And Tina was already ahead of her time. And this is one of her quotes. I stayed on the course from beginning to end because I believed in something inside of me. And I think that's what we all need to remind each other. We are the solution. We need to believe in each other, and together we can create the way out. Thank you. If you want to follow us, follow Antidote here.